want to start maybe with what Chris just mentioned, with where he heard you speak and just the state of the economy and where we are. Why don't you give us a kind of a high level overview of where you're seeing things in the landscape today?
Sure. So, one of our biggest concerns is what our customers are going to do by listening to the constant drumbeat of, is there going to be a recession? Is there not a recession? And we were very concerned that during this fall budgeting season for our customers, that they would react to what they're hearing and pull back on budgets. The worst that we've heard, though, is, well, we're going to keep budgets flat. Now, we've been working hard to help them understand that a flat budget this year is actually a decreased budget, and that the dollars that are going to be necessary for some of the expenses that we can't control are going to take dollars away from. They're really getting their message out to their customer because it's going to be spent on things like material handling and floor space and other expenses that won't necessarily impact their message to their customers as much as we hope. So far we have not received a lot of large scale bad information from customers saying things are going to change. So we're happy about that, but a lot can change. We all know that advertising budgets get cut first when there's a downturn. And so we all know that there's still some uncertainty with the economy and what might happen on the customer side. On the other side, certainly we believe very strongly in there's going to be a continued upward pressure on costs, and it's going to affect all of us. And so whether there's a recession or not, we're all going to have to take some pretty specific actions to combat what I think is going to be more pressure on the cost side than maybe a downturn on the revenue side from a customer perspective. Bigger worry probably for me is if we do get into a more significant downturn at the beginning of this year, what it might do to the late 24 and 25 budgets instead of what we might see in 24. A lot of space has already been committed and customers are going to go to the show. They might pull back a little bit on some of what they're putting out there, but so far, keep your fingers crossed. We have not heard from customers that there's going to be any kind of significant pullback.
On upward pressure on costs, can you explain some of the factors that are really driving that up?
Well, wage inflation is probably the biggest, right? So we see constantly an upward pressure on wages. Now it has tempered from where it was at the beginning, late last year and the beginning of this year. So as you go into 24, you're hopeful that you can keep wage inflation down, but it's still there. And I believe it's not necessarily, the market's not necessarily in favor of the employee the way it was last year, that we finally have regained some control, specifically with a lot of the large employers beginning to lay off people and some of the tech firms laying off people, that there is some relief on that side. But there still is a fairly reasonable increase in energy costs that's going to affect transportation costs. There's still labor issues on the show floor. Chris is a great advocate for workforce and what we need to do from a workforce perspective. And I think we're going to see a big shakeout of a lot of people that were hired at the end of last year and the beginning of this year on show floor and other spaces that support the industry, where they're going to move on, they're going to make changes. And what could happen once that happens? Do we get a lot of overtime? Do we get a lot of upward pressure on some of those costs? And finally, the folks that are supplying the industry and the general contractors and the show organizers, they've seen a fairly significant increase in their costs, and that's being passed on to us. So.
Yeah.
To your point, Dan. So I serve on, as you know, I'm the EDPA representative for the ECA, the Exhibition and Conferences Alliance. So I'm in those monthly calls with Hugh Jones, the CEO of Reed Exhibitions, and a lot of the CISO, Society of Independent Show Organizers. These are the guys that own the shows. And shocking, a month ago, I heard in our meeting, they've got data that 53% of all the professionals that are now working in the business event space since pandemic build back and recovery began, 53% of that workforce is brand new to this industry. And that's globally, right? So when you think about so you were either talking about what we call developing contributors, which is our code name for, we don't want to say young people because like the world likes to put everybody in that group. but people that are new to starting their business careers or seasoned professionals from other vertical markets that have joined this industry, more than half are brand new. And you go, talk about potential for mistakes and missteps in an industry, Dan, that I know you know. It reads one way on paper, but when you're actually in the heat of live events, lots of unknown variables, things that just happen, um, you know, you, you so workforce is it's not just attracting and bringing back more people, but we've got to put some meat on the bone. I think about onboarding and training as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
I
huge.
couldn't agree with you more, Chris, specific on the training aspect. So with the amount of the new people, and you asked generally what were some of the cost increases, there is a hidden cost that you might not say is a economic increase of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4% on some wage base, but it's the fact that there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency right now because of all these new people. So things that you used to count on to take 2 hours are taking 4 hours, or things that you would hope to would have been done on regular time are being done on overtime.